Whenever I have a spare moment, one of the things I just love to do is pull out my sketchbook. And I love doing this because you don't have to worry so much about doing a finished painting, which sometimes can take a while to kind of work on the layers and really bring a finished piece to the point where you're really happy with it. And there's a whole different process that goes on, and it's both really challenging but really rewarding. So I think it's really fun to break that up with doing some quick sketch. And this is a really cool bud that I got from the florist, and it's actually a peony bud. It's kind of a round spherical shape. And I love these because after a day or two, when you put them out in the light, they just begin to burst open with color. But they're kind of cool at this stage. So I'm going to lay this down right in front of me and do a sketch of this. And I'm just going to have fun with it. So usually what I'll do is go ahead and do a sketch very, very lightly on my paper here. Actually, I'm going to turn this to an angle. That'll be much easier for me to paint. Go very light because I don't want to do hard lines, because then you have to erase them afterwards, and sometimes it can leave a mark on your paper. And I'm just going to do a really quick expressive kind of a little sketch on here. Have fun with some of these angles on the foliage. And there's this other cool little bit of a leaf that's coming down here. The other thing that I really love about doing quick sketch is that it gives you an opportunity to experiment with certain kinds of things that you might not feel so comfortable with doing if you were working on a finished piece of artwork. And in this case, I have a brand new pink that I got from Daniel Smith. It's called Rose Madder Permanent, and this is a perfect color for those petals. So first thing I'm going to do is actually come in and paint the foliage. And we're going to start with lemon yellow. It's a really good color for mixing greens. And I'm just going to dunk that in a little bit of this permanent green. And start doing some bold strokes here for the stem. And then I'm going to start designing it. So I have this great brush that I'm working with. It's a pointed round in a size 7. Winsor & Newton Professional Watercolor Sable. And so what's really great about this brush is it has a really great point. I can get bold strokes. I can also get more thicker strokes if I want to push down on the bristles. So it's very versatile, and it's great for doing quick sketch. Mix some yellow. And I'm sort of drawing with the point on my brush, which is really fun. And carving out this really interesting shape that I see here in the leaves. Another thing that I like to do that you might want to try is putting down one color, sort of like a local overall color that you see. And you have to work pretty fast though, because this is a wet and wet technique, which is good because then you can't get too picky with it and you can just have more fun. So I've got one layer on here, and when it is still drying, it's still pretty open, so I can put other color in. So then I start looking back at my subject and noticing that even in this particular leaf here, there's just so many different other shades of green. So I'm going to take a little bit of this dark Prussian blue that I have on my palette and just start dropping it in on the end. And I think this is so cool because it adds a lot of variety and interest, and it is what is happening in nature. You don't just see one color on leaves, you see a lot of different shades. Sometimes you see discoloration, or when the little bits of brown as well, and those can be really interesting to put on there. So, and I'm also seeing on one side of the stem it's more yellowish, so I can even go ahead and put some yellow along one side. That's because the light is catching one side, and the other side is a little bit more in shadow because it's curving away from the light. So I'm going to take the tippy point of my brush and just draw that paint down on one side, and because it's still wet, it's going to all kind of merge together. So you can get that two-tone. So don't be afraid to experiment with lots of different shades of green. It's nice to do some more neutral greens, and you can dull them out by adding some of your browns. And it actually, if you add just a little bit of brown to green, it can make some really interesting shades of green that look very realistic. So now I'm going to start to do some of the yellowish green that I do see right in here in this bud. So I'll take my lemon yellow again and just grab a little bit of my sap green and mix it in there. And I'm going to mix it right here on the paper. See, it's starting to come together with just very minimal brushwork. Just having fun. I push down on my brush to get broad strokes, and then when it comes to areas where I want a little bit more detail, then I usually paint on the tippy point of it. And while it's kind of drying off a little bit, I'll come back and maybe add some more yellow in some other areas just to break it up. And actually, I see some really cool foliage right here on the bottom of this peony. And so even though it's not in view, I can actually design this where maybe I want to put a little bit more foliage over here. And I'm using nature as my inspiration. I'm not doing it exactly the way I see it. I'm just getting a general shape, adding some more of those greens. Notice how I'm moving a lot faster than what I did before, and that's because you'll see this happen too in your own painting. You'll probably want to go a little bit more careful and slowly when you're painting a brand new subject, and then once you kind of get the idea, you'll see yourself begin to speed up just naturally. Sometimes it can take painting a certain subject a few times before you get comfortable with it, so don't be afraid of that. That's really normal in learning a new subject, especially if it's something like portraiture or animal anatomy. That can be a lot more complex. Alright, so I'm taking a little bit more of this Prussian blue and kind of dotting it in there because I want to get some of these really cool imperfections that I see on the peony. Another color that I want to grab is some of my burnt sienna, because that's just a really good color for foliage. And I do see a lot of this rust color right in here. So I'll just do a few strokes of that. And then I definitely see some little spots on the leaves and also on the stem. Kind of like a reddish brown. And then I'm going to take some of this burnt sienna and I'm going to mix it. Just get a generous amount of it here. It's a little bit too watery. So I'll get some more of the thicker paint by going right into my well. And then grab some more Prussian blue because I want to make it a little bit cooler and darker. And just start adding some of that on the tips. Right in here. And then I want to put some water. See how fun this is? You can do a sketch like this in maybe 10-15 minutes or less if you want. So this is a great thing to tell yourself, hey, I have a few extra minutes. Why don't I just grab my sketchbook and paint this? Please don't worry about what it looks like because you are going to be learning so much just from painting. I recommend painting from life as much as you can. That doesn't mean that you can't grab a photograph and paint that too if you're really inspired, but there's something about painting from life because our eye is able to see the values and the color so much better than we see something flattened out on a photograph. So just keep that in mind. Alright, so now I'm adding some of this beautiful pink, and it is kind of blurring a little bit with the green, merging with it, which I really like. So think I'm going to call this finished. Go ahead and sign it. Okay, and I'm going to leave it, and maybe I'll paint another one because this is really inspiring.